When famous comedian Danny the Destroyer Malone spotted Pope Leo XIV in the front row of the charity gala, his eyes lit up with malicious glee. Here was his chance to roast the most powerful religious figure in the world, and the viral clips would keep him trending for months. But he had no idea that the humble man in white possessed a razor-sharp wit that would leave him utterly destroyed on his own stage. What happened next didn't just end his set. It ended his entire approach to comedy. But before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The Beacon Theater in New York glittered with Hollywood glamour as A-list celebrities gathered for the annual Comedy Heals Charity Gala. The event, which raised funds for children's hospitals worldwide, had attracted its most distinguished guest ever, Pope Leo XIV, just 6 weeks into his historic papacy as the first American pope. Danny Malone paced backstage like a caged predator, his trademark smirk growing wider as his assistant showed him the seating chart.
He's really here? The Pope himself?
Front row center, his assistant confirmed nervously. The organizers wanted to honor him for the Vatican's new children's health initiative. Danny's eyes gleamed. For 15 years, he'd built his career on destroying sacred cows, and now the ultimate sacred cow sat waiting in his audience. His Netflix specials were legendary for their brutal takedowns of religion, traditional values, and anyone foolish enough to believe in fairy tales.
This is perfect.
Danny rubbed his hands together.
Forget the prepared material. Tonight, we're going off script.
Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV sat peacefully in his seat, flanked by Cardinal Martinez and 2 uncomfortable-looking security guards. He'd specifically requested no special treatment, just a regular seat among the other guests supporting this worthy cause.
Your Holiness,
Cardinal Martinez whispered.
Perhaps we should have reviewed the entertainment lineup more carefully. This comedian has quite a reputation for helping raise $3 million for sick children last year.
Pope Leo interrupted gently.
Whatever his personal views, his work here does real good.
The lights dimmed and the show began. The opening acts were relatively tame. Observational humor about airline food and dating apps, but everyone knew why they'd really come. Danny the Destroyer Malone was the headline act, the comedian who'd made his fortune by saying what others wouldn't dare. When Danny finally took the stage, the energy in the room shifted. His black leather jacket and designer jeans screamed calculated rebellion, and his opening words set the tone immediately.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a crowd. I see we've got Hollywood royalty, Wall Street wolves, and hold up. Is that God's personal representative in the front row?
A spotlight swung to illuminate Pope Leo XIV, who smiled warmly and gave a small wave. The audience laughed nervously, sensing blood in the water.
Folks, this is incredible.
Danny strutted across the stage.
The Pope himself came to my show. You know what this means? Either my comedy is truly blessed, or ticket prices have gotten so high, even the Vatican needs to fundraise.
The audience chuckled, but Danny was just warming up. His eyes locked onto Pope Leo like a hunter sighting prey.
But seriously, Your Holiness, can I call you that? Or do you prefer Sky Daddy's regional manager?
Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several celebrities shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was aggressive even for Danny Malone. Pope Leo XIV's expression remained serene, his eyes reflecting only gentle interest in the performance.
Look at this guy,
Danny continued, gesturing dramatically.
Sitting there in his white designer robes. Probably cost more than my car. But hey, at least when I wear expensive clothes, I don't claim God told me to do it.
Cardinal Martinez's face flushed red, but Pope Leo placed a calming hand on his arm. His peaceful demeanor only seemed to embolden the comedian.
You know what kills me about religious leaders?
Danny's voice took on a harder edge.
They fly around in private jets, live in palaces, wear golden jewelry, then have the balls to lecture us about materialism. It's like taking diet advice from a sumo wrestler.
The laughter was more scattered now. Many audience members glanced nervously at the Pope, wondering how he'd react to such direct attacks.
And don't get me started on the whole celibacy thing.
Danny pressed on, his confidence growing.
This man voluntarily gave up sex, forever. You know what we call that in the real world? A cry for help.
He pantomimed a phone call.
Hello, therapist. Yeah, I've decided to never experience physical intimacy again because an invisible being told me to. No, I'm totally mentally stable. Why do you ask?
A few people laughed, but most remained silent. The comedian's material was crossing from edgy into cruel.
But here's what really gets me.
Danny leaned against his microphone stand.
We've got actual problems in this world. Climate change, poverty, wars. And this guy's solution? magic words and fancy hand gestures. It's like trying to cure cancer with jazz hands.
He demonstrated with exaggerated blessing motions, his mockery clear.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, which, let's be honest, sounds like the world's weirdest law firm.
Pope Leo XIV's expression remained unchanged, but something in his eyes suggested he was studying the comedian with genuine interest rather than offense. Danny noticed and pounced on it.
Oh, look at that poker face. They must teach that in Pope school. Chapter 1. How to look wise while saying nothing. Chapter 2. Making people feel guilty. Advanced techniques.
The audience's discomfort was palpable now. Even those who weren't religious recognized the mean-spirited nature of the attack.
You know what?
Danny moved closer to the edge of the stage, looking directly at Pope Leo.
Since you're here, let me ask you something. If God is all-powerful and all-loving, why did he make comedians like me who make fun of him? Seems like poor planning, doesn't it?
For the first time, Pope Leo XIV shifted slightly in his seat. Cardinal Martinez tensed, wondering if they should leave.
Or maybe,
Danny's voice dropped to a mock-serious tone.
God just has a really twisted sense of humor. I mean, look at the platypus. That's clearly a divine prank gone wrong.
He waited for the Pope to react, to show anger or embarrassment. Instead, Pope Leo did something unexpected. He smiled, genuinely amused. This threw Danny off balance for just a moment, but he recovered quickly.
Oh, he's smiling. Maybe he's finally getting it. Religion is the ultimate comedy show. You've got talking snakes, magic wine, people living inside whales. If I pitched that as a Netflix series, they'd drug test me. And the best part?
Danny was building to what he thought would be his killer blow.
Millions of people actually believe this stuff. They base their entire lives on stories that make Marvel movies look realistic.
He pointed at Pope Leo again.
This man right here has convinced 1 billion people that he has a direct hotline to the creator of the universe. That's not faith. That's the greatest con job in history.
The theater fell silent. Even Danny's most ardent fans recognized he'd crossed a line. Mocking generic religious concepts was one thing, but personally attacking the Pope to his face was something else entirely.
What, too far?
Danny asked with false innocence.
Come on, if we can't laugh at grown men in dresses claiming to speak for God, what can we laugh at?
That's when Pope Leo XIV slowly raised his hand, as if asking a question in class. The simple gesture commanded instant attention. Danny's eyes lit up with predatory excitement.
Oh, this is amazing! The Pope wants to participate. Please, Your Holiness, enlighten us with your divine wisdom. Maybe explain why kids get cancer while you sit on golden thrones?
Pope Leo stood slowly, his movements deliberate but unthreatening. The security guards started to move, but he waved them back gently.
May I?
Pope Leo asked, gesturing toward the stage. Danny's grin widened. This was better than he'd hoped.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Pope wants to come on stage. This is historic. The holiest man alive is about to get roasted in person.
The audience held its collective breath as Pope Leo XIV made his way to the stage stairs. His white robes flowed gracefully as he climbed, showing no hesitation or anger. Only a quiet purpose that made Danny's brash energy seem suddenly childish.
This is incredible,
Danny narrated for the audience.
The Pope is actually joining me on stage. Security must be having a heart attack right now. What if I corrupt him with my evil secular humor?
Pope Leo reached the stage and extended his hand to Danny. The comedian shook it reflexively, momentarily thrown by the genuine warmth in the gesture.
Danny,
Pope Leo said, his voice carrying perfectly without the microphone.
that was quite a performance. You've clearly put a lot of thought into your material about faith.
Well, someone has to.
Danny shot back, trying to maintain his edge.
Can't let you guys have all the fun making things up?
Pope Leo smiled.
May I share an observation?
Oh, please do.
Danny said mockingly.
Is this where you threaten me with eternal damnation?
Not at all.
Pope Leo replied calmly.
I was just wondering. In all your material about religion, you focus extensively on money, power, and hypocrisy. These are very specific criticisms. They sound personal.
Danny's smirk faltered slightly.
It's called social commentary. I mock all forms of stupidity equally.
Do you?
Pope Leo asked gently.
Because I noticed you didn't mock Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, or any other faith tonight. Only Christianity, only Catholicism. That seems quite targeted for equal opportunity mockery.
The audience leaned forward. This wasn't the defensive reaction they'd expected.
Well, you're the one sitting in the front row.
Danny deflected.
True,
Pope Leo nodded.
but you had material prepared specifically about priests, the Vatican, Catholic doctrine. This wasn't improvisation. You've been carrying this anger for a while.
Danny's jaw tightened.
Maybe I just think your particular brand of delusion is the most dangerous.
Or maybe
Pope Leo suggested softly.
someone wearing a collar like mine hurt you deeply, and you've been trying to hurt them back ever since.
The comedian's face went pale. The audience gasped at the gentle precision of the observation.
You don't know anything about me.
Danny said, his voice losing its performative quality.
I know you were raised Catholic.
Pope Leo continued calmly.
Your early routines mentioned attending Catholic school. I know you stopped mentioning your family around the same time your material became aggressively anti-religious. And I know that kind of specific, sustained anger only comes from profound disappointment.
Danny stood frozen, his usual quick wit completely absent. The predator had become prey, but not through aggression, through compassion.
You want to know what I find interesting about your comedy?
Pope Leo asked, taking a step closer.
You're brilliantly observant about human nature. Your insights into relationships, society, and personal struggles show real wisdom. But whenever you approach the topic of faith, that wisdom disappears. You become someone else, someone younger, angrier, still fighting old battles.
Stop,
Danny whispered, but Pope Leo continued with infinite gentleness.
Who was it, Danny? Which priest failed you? Which person who should have represented God's love showed you cruelty instead?
The theater was absolutely silent. Danny's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the microphone.
This isn't...
Danny started, then stopped.
You can't just...
I'm not here to defend whoever hurt you.
Pope Leo said firmly.
If someone in the church caused you pain, that's a tragedy and a failure. We're called to be Christ's hands and feet in the world. And when we fail, the wounds can last a lifetime.
Danny's carefully constructed stage persona was crumbling. The audience watched in stunned silence as the comedian who specialized in destroying others was gently deconstructed himself.
Father McKenna,
Danny said suddenly, the name escaping like a held breath.
I was 12. My mom was dying of cancer, and I went to him. I begged him to pray for a miracle. You know what he said?
Pope Leo waited, his face full of compassion.
He said maybe God wanted her to die, that it was part of his plan, that I should accept it and stop questioning divine will.
Danny's voice cracked.
She died 2 weeks later, and I've spent 20 years making sure everyone knows what a joke your God is.
I'm so sorry.
Pope Leo said simply.
Father McKenna was wrong, terribly, cruelly wrong.
Danny looked up sharply. What?
God doesn't want children to lose their mothers.
Pope Leo continued.
Death and suffering entered the world through sin, not through God's desire. Jesus wept at Lazarus's tomb. He grieves with us in our losses. What Father McKenna should have done was cry with you, pray with you, and help carry your impossible burden.
But he didn't,
Danny said bitterly.
No, he didn't. And that failure has poisoned your view of faith ever since. You've been attacking God for 20 years because a flawed man failed to show you God's heart.
Danny stood speechless. The audience remained frozen, witnessing something far more profound than comedy.
You know what the real tragedy is?
Pope Leo asked gently.
Your mother's faith that you've been mocking all these years. I bet it wasn't like Father McKenna's cold theology at all.
Danny's eyes filled with tears he couldn't hide.
She never stopped believing, even at the end, said she'd see me again.
And you've been furious about that ever since.
Pope Leo observed.
Not because you think she was wrong, but because you're terrified she was right. And if she was right, then you've spent 20 years running from the only thing that could heal your grief, the hope of seeing her again.
Stop, Danny said, but it came out as a plea rather than a demand.
Your comedy about religion isn't really comedy,
Pope Leo continued.
It's a 20-year-long argument with your mother's faith. Every joke is you trying to prove she was wrong to believe, because if she was right, then you have to face the possibility that Father McKenna doesn't speak for God any more than you do.
Danny's legs seemed unsteady. Pope Leo moved closer, ready to support him if needed.
You've made millions laugh at faith,
The Pope said softly.
but you've never healed the 12-year-old boy who just wanted his mother to live. That boy is still there, still angry, still wondering why God didn't answer his prayer the way he wanted.
She suffered.
Danny whispered.
For months, she suffered.
I know.
Pope Leo replied.
And where was God? The same place he was when his own son suffered on the cross. Right there with her. Suffering too. Preparing a place where suffering can never touch her again.
The comedian who destroyed hundreds of hecklers stood defenseless before simple truth, spoken with love.
But let me tell you something else.
Pope Leo said, his voice gaining strength.
Your mother's prayers were answered. Just not how you expected. She prayed for her son to find his way to God. And here you are, using the incredible gift of humor God gave you to help sick children, even while denying Him. You've been serving God accidentally for years.
A ripple of recognition went through the audience. Danny's charity work was legendary. He'd raised more money for children's causes than almost any other entertainer.
That's not...
Danny started weakly.
Every child whose life you've saved through your fundraising, every family you've helped, that's your mother's prayer being answered through you. You thought you were rebelling against God, but He's been using your rebellion to heal others. Only a God with a sense of humor could pull that off.
For the first time in his professional career, Danny Malone had no comeback. The man who lived by his words stood wordless.
You asked earlier why God would make comedians who mock Him.
Pope Leo reminded him.
Maybe it's because He knows that sometimes the angriest voices against faith are the ones that need it most. Maybe He's patient enough to wait 20 years for a hurt boy to finish his tantrum and come home.
I can't.
Danny said, his voice barely audible.
I've said too much, mocked too much. I've made a career out of destroying what she believed.
Peter denied Christ 3 times in one night.
Pope Leo replied.
He not only went on to become the first pope, but tradition says he asked to be crucified upside down because he didn't feel worthy to die the same way as Jesus. God specializes in transformation, not condemnation.
The audience watched in amazement as Danny the Destroyer Malone began to cry openly on stage. The man who'd built walls of sarcasm and cynicism for 2 decades stood completely exposed.
She wouldn't want this for you?
Pope Leo said gently.
20 years of pain disguised as punchlines. Your mother would want you to heal, to hope, maybe even to believe that love is stronger than death.
How?
Danny asked through his tears.
How do I just forget what Father McKenna said? How do I forget being told God wanted my mom to die?
You don't forget, Pope Leo answered. You forgive. Not for his sake, but for yours. You've been carrying his cruelty longer than you carried your mother's love. It's time to put down the wrong burden. Pope Leo extended his hand to the broken comedian.
Would you like to pray with me? Not to the cold God that Father McKenna described, but to the one who collects every tear, who promises that sorrow is temporary, but joy is eternal.
The theater held its breath. Danny Malone looked at the extended hand, the hand of everything he'd spent 20 years hating and mocking. Then, slowly, he took it.
I don't remember how,
Danny admitted. Then I'll help you remember, Pope Leo said simply, just like your mother once taught you. As the 2 men stood together on stage, the mocker and the mocked, the comic and the cleric, something shifted in the atmosphere. The audience watched the public demolition of a man's defenses and the beginning of his rebuilding.
Our Father.
Pope Leo began softly.
Our Father,
Danny repeated, his voice shaky but present.
Who art in heaven.
The Pope continued.
who art in heaven?
Danny echoed, and suddenly he was 12 again, praying with his mother before the world broke his heart. As they continued the prayer together, something extraordinary happened. One by one, audience members began to stand and join in. Not out of religious obligation, but out of human recognition that they were witnessing something profound. A man finding his way back to hope after 20 years of exile. By the time they reached Amen, half the theater was on its feet, many with tears in their eyes. The comedy show had become something else entirely, a moment of genuine human connection and healing. Danny looked out at the audience, then back at Pope Leo.
I don't know what to say. This isn't how I planned tonight going.
The best moments rarely are, Pope Leo smiled. You came here to destroy faith with humor. Instead, maybe you've discovered that faith and humor aren't enemies. Both help us cope with the absurdity and pain of existence. Both remind us we're not alone. I've said terrible things, Danny said, about you, about the church, about God. And yet here we are, Pope Leo replied. Grace is funny that way. It shows up exactly when we think we've disqualified ourselves from receiving it. Danny wiped his eyes, a glimpse of his sharp wit returning.
You know what? You're right about God having a sense of humor. Getting roasted by the Pope? That's definitely not in my contract.
The audience laughed. Not the harsh laughter of mockery, but the warm laughter of shared humanity.
20 years of anger is a hard habit to break,
Danny said more seriously. Then don't try to break it all at once, Pope Leo advised. Start with one prayer, one conversation with your mother in your heart, one moment of considering that maybe the 12-year-old boy who believed wasn't wrong, he just met the wrong messenger. As Pope Leo prepared to leave the stage, Danny called out,
Wait, can I ask you something?
Of course.
Do you really think...
Danny's voice caught.
Do you really think I'll see her again?
Pope Leo's answer carried the weight of absolute conviction.
I don't think it, Danny. I know it. And when you do, she won't ask why it took so long. She'll just be glad you made it home.
As the Pope descended from the stage, the entire theater erupted in applause. But it wasn't for the performance. It was for the transformation they'd witnessed. Danny, the destroyer Malone, who'd made a fortune tearing down sacred things, had been rebuilt by the very faith he'd tried to demolish. The next morning, Danny's social media posts shocked his fan base.
Last night I went to war with God and lost beautifully. 20 years ago, I buried my mother and my faith in the same week. I've spent every day since trying to prove both were meaningless. But sometimes grace ambushes you through the last person you'd expect. To Pope Leo XIV, thank you for showing me that the opposite of faith isn't doubt, it's fear. And I'm tired of being afraid. Mom, if you're listening, I'm finally ready to have that conversation again.
The post went viral within hours, not because a comedian had been humiliated, but because a broken man had been healed. Comments poured in from others who'd lost faith through pain, finding hope in Danny's vulnerability. Pope Leo XIV, reading the post in his Vatican office, smiled quietly.
Another lost sheep,
He murmured.
finding his way home.
Cardinal Martinez, standing nearby, shook his head in amazement.
Your Holiness, he came to destroy you.
No,
Pope Leo corrected gently.
he came to destroy the false god that hurt him. Sometimes we have to clear away the caricature before people can see the real thing. Danny's anger was never really about God. It was about love, interrupted by death and deepened by bad theology.
In the weeks that followed, Danny's comedy evolved. He still pushed boundaries, still challenged authority, but the cruel edge was gone. His jokes about religion became more thoughtful, distinguishing between faith itself and those who failed to represent it well. During his next special, he told the story of that night.
I used to think religious people were weak for needing faith. Turns out I was the weak one, carrying grudges I was too scared to put down. Pope Leo didn't convert me that night. He just showed me I'd been fighting the wrong enemy for 20 years. The real joke? I thought I was too smart for God. But maybe God's just patient enough to wait for smartasses like me to figure out we're not as smart as we think.
The audience laughed, but it was different now. Humor that healed instead of hurt, that brought people together instead of tearing them apart. 6 months later, Danny received a package from the Vatican. Inside was a simple wooden cross and a handwritten note. Danny, your mother would be proud of the man you're becoming. Not perfect, but honest. Keep making people laugh. The world needs humor that heals. And remember, the best comedy has always been about truth. And the greatest truth is that we're loved more than we know. In Christ's joy of Pope Leo XIV, Danny hung the cross in his dressing room, where it reminded him nightly that grace could ambush anyone, even a comedian who'd made a career out of destroying sacred things. The story of that night became legend in both comedy and religious circles. It proved that authentic faith could withstand any mockery, that love was stronger than anger, and that sometimes the most unlikely people become the most powerful witnesses to grace. As one audience member later wrote,
I came to see a comedian destroy a pope. Instead, I saw a pope restore a comedian. In a world full of takedowns and cancellations, maybe what we really need is more lifting up. Danny got roasted that night, but not by burns. By love so genuine it melted 20 years of ice around his heart.
and that's the greatest comedy of all, that grace gets the last laugh. Not through humiliation, but through healing. Not through force, but through patient, persistent, impossible love that waits decades for the perfect moment to strike. In the end, Danny was right about one thing. God does have a sense of humor. How else do you explain turning a professional mocker into an accidental evangelist, using comedy meant to destroy faith to ultimately restore it? The show that night raised $5 million for children's hospitals, but its greatest achievement wasn't measured in money. It was in showing that even the hardest hearts can break open when touched by unexpected grace. And somewhere in heaven, a mother smiled, knowing her prayers had finally been answered in the most unexpected way possible, through laughter, tears, and a pope. And if you enjoyed this story, please share your thoughts in the comments below. God bless you.